could be the next Barbara Walters.
I believe that Mr. Gorbachev, you know, the man who ran Russia for so long, I believe that he would still be in power today if he had that big purple thing taken off his forehead.
That's not happiness to see me, is it?
You gotta be able to do things that ordinary people wouldn't do.
He gets like $100 million. Good evening from the WWEN Weather Center. What do you think Stephen will do? You know about that, right? You're not anybody in America unless you're on TV.
You did not meet my wife by chance. She is in love. You're in business. It's called a con, and my wife is the grand prize.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon,
do it!
we decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for getting close to a year and a half.
Yes.
So I think
Lots
there's
of
something
content.
like high 30s, getting close to the 40 bonus episodes back there. So you haven't made the jump to Patreon. That's how many episodes are waiting for you. And speaking of which, we do have one patron to thank this week. And they are Keenan, Stella.
Keenan, thank you.
Thanks.
Go off, King.
Thanks so much for joining us and getting all those bonus episodes. And the other plug, if you guys are listening on iTunes and you guys have been enjoying the show, make sure to go give us a good old rating and review over on iTunes. It helps us find new listeners. We really appreciate that as well. But those are your plugs for the week. I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me as always is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back.
We are back talking sleazy movies for all the free listeners this week. And as usual, actually, except for last week.
Yeah, but usual.
Anyway, we do have a guest for you guys. But 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you guys heard from us. We went OG Boys guestless, and there was a Child's Play remake out, which I still haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not going to like it, but I haven't seen it yet either, so I won't say anything.
Yeah, I haven't even read too much about it, honestly. But we did the original Child's Play from 1988, directed by Tom Holland, written by Don Mancini, and we paired it with another movie about a children's toy coming to life
everybody.
To do some violence, and that was Joe Dante's 1998 film Small Soldiers, which is also a kind of consumerism and militarism satire at the same time.
Underrated.
Which is really underrated. Jamie and I went to bat for that one. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was 2 weeks ago at whatever podcast listener of choice. But last week, for patrons, you guys would have got your special bonus episode, and we were doing World War II Men on a Mission movies.
Yeah, they were great.
We did The Dirty Dozen, 1967, and we also did Where Eagles Dare, 1968, with Richard Burton and
Non-stop
Clint Eastwood.
action. It's like a 2.5 hour set piece.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So if you haven't heard that episode and you want that episode, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. But getting all that out of the way, we have a very special guest for you guys. He is a film editor out of Massachusetts, but also primarily a meme generator, a living meme generator on Twitter, talking all the time about mobsters and, I mean, I guess movies.
Yeah,
and specifically mob movies.
Yeah, and the combination of the two.
And
yeah, I mean, that's my sweet spot for sure.
Exactly, and that is Nick Usen. Nick, how are you doing?
What's going on, guys? Thank you for having me on. This is a real treat. I mean, and also, too, this is, if you can believe it, the first time I've ever been asked to be on a podcast. So,
what? Oh, wow. Criminal.
This is a beautiful moment. So
honored.
I'm psyched.
No,
awesome.
I saw the kind of movies that he was into, and I was like, he seems right for our show. So that being said, Nick, you know how this works. We get a guest to bring on the two films with them. So what two films have you brought with you, and why have you paired them together?
So we went with two 90s classics, in my opinion. So Gus Van Sant's To Die For, and then A Perfect Murder by the auteur, Andrew Davis. Beloved Hollywood director, Andrew Davis, who everyone knows and loves. And when I looked at your episodes, I was thinking, well, what genre do I want to do? And you said I love mob stuff. And I was thinking, oh, maybe that, or maybe something even more sort of classic exploitation like The Warriors or something like that. But then something I find us talking about a lot on Twitter together, Josh, is sort of what's going on in Hollywood today and the death of the mid-budget studio movie. And so to me, these encapsulate this sort of adult thriller genre that just doesn't get made anymore. I mean, I don't consider 50 Shades of Grey this. I consider 50 Shades of Grey a parody of these movies.
Absolutely.
and it's crazy, right? I mean, these are movies made for adults with real Hollywood stars and for, a mid-budget range. And there was an audience for these type of movies that just isn't there anymore. I mean,
a Perfect Murder, I looked it up. It opened at number 2 at the box office. So
Wow.
imagine like the number 2 movie.
Huge.
Yeah, and it cost $60 million. They spent $60 million on that movie.
Unbelievable. The 90s, man. It was just a crazy time.
I was about to say, I'm sure 20 mil of that went into Michael Douglas's pocket. I mean,
100%. I mean,
sure.
after his career trajectory in the 90s, that's definitely where most of that went. Because I did look it up too. To Die For cost like 1/3 of that.
Oh, wow.
So it had to have been a case where they were just Michael Douglas's salary was definitely a huge bump on their budget.
Must have been at the height of his career.
What's really interesting to me too about A Perfect Murder specifically is, so directed by Andrew Davis, who I was sort of clowning on earlier because that's a name that I certainly didn't know off the top of my head. But then, you look at his IMDb, this guy directed Under Siege. He directed The Fugitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was a big time Hollywood director.
In the 90s, yeah.
But in the 90s. And so it's like, you think about, I feel like if a guy like that today made, a movie that opened number 2, an adult thriller like this guy would either be directing a Marvel movie next or everyone, or like an elevated horror movie, I guess, but people would know who he was. But he's a total journeyman, right? I mean, the most sort of like anonymous, I can see why the studios loved him because he just probably knew how to bring a movie in on time and under budget. But it's to me, that's indicative of something that just doesn't happen anymore, where you just don't have sort of guys moving around. Like, I can't imagine Michael Douglas sort of being in a movie and being directed by a guy like Andrew Davis.
No, Michael Douglas is now in Ant-Man, right? That's his thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's in the Marvel movie now.
As is Gwyneth Paltrow. So 2 out of 3 and then Viggo Mortensen is Viggo. He went on to be in Lord of the Rings. I mean, all 3 of these people are still cashing checks.
Now, Nicole Kidman, on the other hand, Big Little Lies.
Oh, yes, yeah. I haven't seen that yet. But
on HBO Sunday nights right now. We are not sponsored. This is not a sponsorship.
No, but if they want to sponsor the pod, they should.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
I'll take that HBO money. Come on, what's going on here? All right, well, that's a pretty good intro. I think that we are going to, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start here. We're going to do...
And I do have to say, I brought this up pre-pod, but they are both 107 minutes, which I definitely did on purpose. So they were clearly meant to be discussed together. Yes. But all right.
Exactly. All right, well, we're going to jump into it, and we are going to start here. We're going to talk To Die For.
Columbia Pictures welcomes you to the real America,
Suzanne, did you get those kids to kill your husband?
where criminals get to be celebrities
It was on First Edition and American Justice.
and celebrities get away with murder.
It's nice to live in a country where life, liberty, and all the rest of it still stand for something.
Nicole Kidman is To Die For.
All right, we are talking To Die For, the 1995 crime thriller comedy drama, also mockumentary.
Satire of America.
So many words, so many genres, Gus. Directed by one Gus Van Sant or Goose Van Sant, however you want to do that one. Sorry, buddy.
Honestly, know what it also would have paired pretty well with is Pain and Gain, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
I thought because everyone's always saying like, oh, that's a movie about America. I was like, To Die For might be the most American movie ever made.
I agree.
It is based on the novel of the same name by one Joyce Maynard, which was loosely based on the story of a real-life criminal by the name of Pamela Smart.
Oh,
who notoriously, on May 1st, 1990, convinced her 15-year-old lover and his 3 friends to kill her 24-year-old husband.
So it's accurate down to that detail. Wow.
Yeah.
So that is what the book was inspired by, and by extension, what the film was inspired by. I did think it was funny doing a little bit of research on it that it was revealed that in the book version of this, apparently, the character Suzanne Stone states that if anyone was to ever make a movie about her life, that she would want the actress that was married to Tom Cruise in real life to play her.
Really?
And that was Nicole Kidman at the time.
That's unbelievable.
Wow. Talk about calling your shot. I mean, that is speaking big time energy into existence. I mean, that's great for her.
Yeah, and Nicole Kidman read for the character and begged for the part, whereas other actresses, apparently Meg Ryan turned the role down. People were turning the role down because they thought it was this gross character, and Nicole Kidman was like, "This sounds like the juiciest role of my life."
Exactly. She just gets to chew the scenery in every single scene.
And Nicole Kidman is the star. She's more of the auteur of this movie than even Gus Van Sant is.
I think so too.
100%. But how about the fact that Meg Ryan turned down $5 million?
She turned down $5 million to star in the movie.
And this was the 90s, so that's pretty much 10 mil, if we're being real.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But for anyone who hasn't seen the film, it loosely follows a woman by the name of Susan Stone Moretto, played by Nicole Kidman, who from a very young age always wanted to be a world-famous news anchor / TV personality. And over the course of this sort of mockumentary formatted film, we get the sort of her rise to it doesn't even get that high. She just really becomes the weather person at a small local,
which I loved about it. Right?
Oh, it's great.
It's the how small a scale it is. Very sort of Coen Brothers esque feel. I mean,
exactly farcical.
Definitely,
what's this all for?
And yet, her narcissism,
definitely Fargo esque.
Yeah, and yet her narcissism it constantly paints this image that she feels the entire world is watching her. When in fact it's just
she's
this,
always on.
Small New Hampshire.
There's a great performative element to this, and most of the movie though follows her as she tries to climb up the corporate ladder of TV news, and kind of her charming go-getter charismatic attitude combined with what seems a bit like a we'll say a sociopath streak of not really caring how it is that she ends up reaching her goals.
The ultimate schemer for sure. I mean,
exactly.
It seems like every single interaction she has with somebody is like she's in a job interview. She's constantly trying to convince them.
Do you know another movie that did that exact same thing?
Nightcrawler. Dude, I was gonna say that. It felt like
right down to the performance.
Gyllenhaal might have grabbed a couple little traits from her performance.
I think he had to have stolen some because my literal note about Jake Gyllenhaal's performance in that movie when I saw that movie was he feels like he's constantly in a job interview in that really fake sell yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And Tony Gilroy definitely cribbed from this too. I mean,
that Network and a couple other media satires that were coming out around that time. And I mean, this too itself is a media satire, but I do think that Gus Van Sant is kind of interested in doing something else here, kind of formally, because I think a lot of people have seen this. I was reading up on the movie, and the movie seems to have pretty positive reactions, and the criticisms of the movie were mostly that its media satire really wasn't super sharp. It was a little thin, broad, I guess, if they felt like low-hanging fruit of the actual target of its critique.
Which is funny, right? Because it almost feels like I can see people why they would say that back then, but it almost feels 20 years ahead of its time with people on Instagram, right? I mean, I kept saying to myself, is she the first live streamer? Did she invent just constantly putting on an act?
No, for real. And I also think that Gus Van Sant's style is anything but thin. Like, I think he is totally committed to this film as like just a total trash, like true crime Lifetime movie. It has a camp and absurdity to it that I completely did not expect, that, you know, I think says something about the idea of news as entertainment. I mean, this movie is so funny and so entertaining that, you know, I feel like he almost implicates an audience who you kind of like watching Nicole Kidman. You're kind of like, she's such a great presence. And I feel like there's something in that where he's implicating you as an audience member, being like, well, that's what she's going for. Like you're ascribing to her worldview by being like, yeah, she's doing some really shitty things, but I kind of like watching her.
Yeah, like you're buying what she's selling right now.
Exactly. Magnetic is a great word to put it.
Mm-hmm. How about the streak Gus Van Sant went on though? I mean, I was looking at it, literally went My Own Private Idaho, this. What else? I think his Psycho's interesting. I know it's not a good movie, but then, and Good Will Hunting, which I'm a masshole, right? So I love Good Will Hunting, which again I know perhaps doesn't age well, but that's still an incredible streak for him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Well, and I mean, I found it funny reading about this that Good Will Hunting got made because of this movie.
Really?
Specifically because...
Is it just because it did well, or...
Well, no, he was doing auditions for the young kids.
Okay.
And he auditioned Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Casey Affleck for playing the character that Casey Affleck eventually plays in the film.
Oh, wow.
And by doing that, he gave it to Casey, rightfully so, I think, and specifically because of one thing that I've always preferred Casey over the other two for, that he's like, he actually does have a real deal Boston accent still, and is kind of grimier and dirtier.
Beautiful, I love it, yeah.
He's just scrappy, too. I mean, and because that's what they said Van Sant saw, is Casey Affleck has never lost his edge, and you know, not to get into other stuff outside.
We'll just talk about him as an actor right now.
right. But at least on screen, right, you buy him as a street guy. Like, even in The Town, Ben Affleck, you're like, I'm watching Ben Affleck. Gone Baby Gone, you're like, you know, Casey Affleck looks like a dirtbag detective.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. One of the genius moves of Gone Baby Gone is the fact that Ben Affleck did not cast himself. I can almost tell that he wanted to cast himself,
real,
and he held back on it and cast his brother, who was way better in every way for that role. But also,
because then you get Live by Night, which even I thought was a disaster. The biggest Ben Affleck apologist on the planet. Even I threw my hands up in disgust at that movie.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it. I
was like, Ben, when you started directing, you knew your lesson. You didn't cast yourself, and then he
just wiped that all away. I'm doing it all.
But the thing about it is, meeting all three of those actors, Casey, after the film, brought Gus Van Sant, literally handed to him the screenplay for Good Will Hunting that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote.
Oh, that's how they hooked it up?
And then he directed it.
Wow, that's incredible.
I think that dirtbag Harvey Weinstein didn't want Gus Van Sant and kept trying to get them to do it without him. And one of their contingencies was it had to be Van Sant who did it.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
Stood
and
their ground.
They didn't listen to Weinstein, so very happy about that.
But returning back to Die For here real quick, the thing that I think, again, really struck me about this film has to be the fact that Nicole Kidman's performance is like nuclear, like galaxy brain.
My first note is just Nicole Kidman is a star, which sounds so stupid to say, but I tried to picture myself in 1995 seeing this, and she comes on the screen, and you're like, oh, this is the most famous woman on the planet.
Yeah, she's absolutely like electric right away. I'm not someone that's seen too much Kidman, so she's never been, I knew she was talented, but I just never got into her. To see this film, I totally understand her hype now. You know what I mean? And it also seemed like this was kind of lead into her role when she later on did that role with Tom Cruise and Stanley Kubrick, right?
Yeah, Eyes Wide Shut. She did it very like 3 or 4 years later, I think.
Yeah, very hypersexual. It's like a darker version in a sense.
Yeah. No, exactly. She was doing some really interesting work, and I think that
Also, she's good in Batman. I'll just say it. I mean, she is.
She got the role of a lifetime for Batman, or maybe she made it into the role of a lifetime. She's in Batman Forever, and it's incredible because her only characteristic is she just really wants to fuck Batman. Like she's so horny
she's
for
just
Batman.
super horny.
That's literally
for Batman.
her character. She like the rubber like moves past her, and she's like, oh my god, and she's
she makes
constantly
it
in those
work
nightgowns.
Yeah,
because she's a star. She's a star. She just is.
absolutely.
No, and I think that she's like incredibly performative here in a way that, you know, you could tell that she latched onto this character.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, this character is really fascinating where, you know, she's always kind of blurring together, you know, her own goals and desires with like this, you know, kind of this understandably determined personality that you feel like, you know, you watch that, you're like, that person's got it going on, they got it together.
Yeah.
But she takes it to that next level where she's like, and it is so funny, I didn't realize it until we were mentioning it, how small scale it actually is, because like again, you imagine this movie and you imagine her like
in Little Hope, New Hampshire, which is a hysterical gag.
Exactly. Like there's another version of this movie where she's like trying to become like CEO of a company, and it's like this weird like House of Cards thing where she's maneuvering behind the scenes and fucking people's lives up on like this epic
it's just
scale.
Small townspeople. She's just ruining all of their lives.
That's just Michael Clayton focus on Tilda Swinton is just the serious version of this movie.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I do think that like the comedy bent that they took with this is like a huge reason of why it works. And I mean, like, I love the scenes where like she's going to the broadcasting conference and she starts just immediately like being like, okay, what do professional broadcasters talk about? And she starts picking up literal lines that people are saying to each other and basically just trying to also be a magnet in the room. She tries to stand out. She's always in these like just these amazingly glorious outfits with her huge blonde hair. She's like dancing around
she looks
everyone.
like Jessica Rabbit in this. I mean,
for real.
She literally looks like a pinup come to life. And I think also too, I don't want to psychoanalyze Nicole Kidman too much, but my assumption is sort of part of what she saw in this character is Nicole Kidman was, you know, coming up as an actress, I think learned how to manipulate people who were just, you know, trying to use her for her looks. And sort of the character does the same thing in this movie, right? I mean, she just perfectly knows how to... She leans
into people leering at her and uses it to her advantage.
Right.
Yeah.
She sees how the world works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And just goes with it.
Yeah, and in a way, too, I would say this, and even A Perfect Murder are both low-key one of my other favorite genres of movies, which is a con man movie. You know, they both sort of involve these people who are just so good at being chameleons. Very sort of like Mr. Ripley-esque in this for me. Of how she redeploys people's lines later in the movie.
That's one of my absolute favorite scenes. When she hears that line at the conference, I forget, I think he says the line where it's like, TV is bringing our homes into the world and bringing the world into our homes. And he says that at like this, like, you know, this big old, it sounds like a fake, like a hollow corporate,
tagline,
tagline, exactly, that someone's giving at a conference. And then she says it on an interpersonal level in a job interview, but she delivers it with so much more conviction and like around this constructed persona of this go-getter that she takes that guy by storm. I mean, a huge part of it is obviously she looks amazing, but then also she delivers it with real conviction as if like she completely, like it's something she believes in, like it's an ideology almost. And she says it to this guy who's like a 2-person like news broadcast station where he's like spilling food on himself. He's played by like the guy from Jurassic Park. Yeah, exactly. And he's just blown away. Like that line, which should have just been like this old guy, like, you know, saying some bullshit at a conference, and he hears that and he's like, it's the word of God now all of a sudden. And watching that transition and how she does that, and you know, the amount of like actual, you know, construction and creativity she has to implement to do that. It's amazing to see, and you can see her pursuit of this like TV self-actualization. And then also we get fed all this
she's
stuff.
The most confidence of anyone I've ever seen. She's got confidence oozing out of her pores.
Yeah, and we get all those amazing asides where she gets to address the camera directly. And again, she's putting on a performance for even Gus Van Sant's camera, which is like just another layer of it. This mockumentary aspect that they're doing where everyone's kind of talking in a bit of a non-linear way, like kind of about her. And again, because even scenes that don't have her, they're talking about her. She's like the motivating center of everything that happens in this movie.
And what I love too is the fact, like, you know, the way that they have each character talk about her. They're always in this very natural environment, so they're like where they would feel comfortable. You know, the sisters at the ice rink. I think the father's at his home, things like that. And then you go to her, and she's just in this white room where it's just, you know, like, staring into your soul with those blue eyes.
You're like, is she in the TV room from the Willy Wonka movie? It's just it's too white. It's almost too white.
Yeah, I thought they were almost going to go into like a more, because I don't know if it'd necessarily be a cliche in the 90s. I thought they was going to like zoom out and she'd be in this white padded room or some shit, like pretending she was on the news or something like that. It ends up she has a lot more power, but
well, the I guarantee you that Margot Robbie just watch this movie on a loop before doing I, Tonya. Because even to 100%. The indictments of the audience, right, where she's like, you know, this is what you wanted to see.
Yeah.
And that's what Nicole Kidman, she's doing in this too, right? She's like, listen, this is America. It's the best line in the movie. You're not anybody in America unless you're on TV. She said that in 1995. Yeah. I mean, that is now ahead of its time, as far as I'm concerned.
I also love how she adds too. She's like, and not only that, but it makes you a better person.
I love that bit. Well, because she's like, on TV is where we learn about who we really are, and because like, what's the point of doing anything worthwhile if nobody's watching? And and if you're watching, that makes you a better person.
It just makes you a better person.
Yeah.
So some heavy king of always growing too, in a way.
Again, TV has like superseded like morality. That's what she means by a good person at that point, you know? Which is amazing because you pick up with this character and she's already who she is. We get hints at her background that, you know, she grew up in, you know, like a wealthy family and she grew up watching a lot of TV, and, you know, where again, TV is this constructed thing that she just consumed, and she realized, I want to be that giant monster that people consume. Yeah. And that was her dream.
And also she wants her life to be almost constructed like a television show would be, where it's like, you know, there's no imperfections. As soon as someone says no to her, we know what happens. There's that great shot of her like hyper focusing in on Matt Dillon, where it just goes into that kind of that
she's
black
like the
circle.
Terminator.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like if someone says no to her, she looks like a robot that's malfunctioning and the Kill Bill sirens are going off.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see her eye twitch. It's great face acting because in so many times in this movie you see, like, at the end when Liddy comes to try and talk to her after Matt Dillon's been killed, you briefly see like the facade slip away, and then the real sort of murderous Kidman comes out, and then she quickly pulls it back together. It's a really phenomenal performance.
Yeah, and I mean, she spends large portions of the movie always performing in front of people. I was thinking specifically, because as we get into maybe some of the plot stuff for people who haven't seen it, she starts doing a documentary about young children, about high schoolers, and she wants to take a bit of like a gritty, like, what are the kids feeling, and she's pretending like she's got like the same thesis of like Harmony Korine, but like really she's like a corporate TV broadcaster wannabe who's just taking her own camera around, which apparently, by the way, Nicole Kidman did shoot all the video footage of the kids in character and everything.
That's cool.
So
that's
really
cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That feels like something Van Sant would do.
Yeah, I wanted to experiment with what Nicole Kidman's character would taking over the like literally she takes over the camera. Like, come on, you can't get more like on the nose than that.
She really does remind me a lot of De Niro in The King of Comedy in this. Right. I mean, that the whole sort of the just won't take no for an answer, the blind confidence, because I love too how she doesn't really, she's trying to process the information on her honeymoon at the conference, and she just doesn't understand the joke that the woman wrote the note that she wrote the note herself, but she knows it's important. So she's like, I don't really get it, but I want to file this away for later.
Yeah, where it was like someone was using her, again, someone using their looks and their sexual prowess as a, hierarchy climbing, a corporate climbing tactic, and she registers that, and she's just like, oh, this is an industry run by men, so I do have, I have different tools that I could apply to them, and she learns that, and then you can always see her constantly, picking up information and regurgitating it or reusing it or learning from it, and becoming a better manipulator out of it. And eventually she does use sex as a, weaponizing it.
Oh, yeah.
Against underage boys in school.
Poor Phoenix, man.
Hate to see it. Joaquin Phoenix, by the way, probably the second best performance in this movie.
What a cast in this movie.
Unbelievable.
Also, Nicole Kidman, Joaquin Phoenix, Casey Affleck, Matt Dillon, and then pretty much every other minor role is like a great character actor too.
David Cronenberg plays the mobster.
yeah. I mean, literally nothing has ever hit my quadrant of interest more than David Cronenberg as a mob hitman in a Gus Van Sant movie. I mean, that's pretty much, that just hit it all.
They focus grouped your ass.
Seriously, yeah.
He was like, look, I like your movie, but I've got some notes. I need to see David Cronenberg.
Get a new Cronenberg in this.
And he's great, too.
Oh,
You totally buy him.
Yeah, I mean, he's like very creepy.
Very sort of David Lynch-esque. Very sort of like Frank Booth.
Yeah, the kind of character who you can imagine there's a life outside of the movie that you've seen them in.
Yeah.
And I mean, these two things end up coalescing because she marries Matt Dillon because his family owns an Italian restaurant, and everyone makes jokes about how they're connected to the mob, and they're like, hey, that's a stereotype. And then she ends up convincing Casey Affleck and Joaquin Phoenix and a bunch of their sort of like poorer high school students in the community to murder her husband, played by Matt Dillon, because he ends up being like, look, you need to stop spending time on this, mission to become the best weather woman, and you need to instead, we should start a family. We should do other kinds of things. And she's like,
we'll move to California. We'll start a television show.
Yeah, she was like, that cannot happen. I have these goals that don't include you. And so she manipulates the kids into murdering Matt Dillon.
How about the conversation with Matt Dillon's mother too by the pool, where the mother's asking her if they have any plans for kids anytime soon, and Nicole Kidman says something to the effect of, well, what if I'm in New York and I get called away on assignment to a royal wedding or a war zone? And the mother's looking at her like, what planet are you on?
It's like, you've done the weather once.
Isn't your job technically secretary at the cable station? And she's like, I'm gonna go cover Princess Diana's funeral. I can't have a baby. It's like insane.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
And Nicole Kidman sells it too, which is the funniest thing. Like she has so much conviction for this mission, despite the fact that we are seeing it on such a small scale. And this persona that she sort of like constructed around it, and how that persona is going to take priority over, real life relationships and obviously eventually just human life.
Yeah. One of the best moments is when Phoenix and her in the car, and it's when she's like at the last second convincing him to kill him, and it almost seems like she manipulates him in such a way that
he comes up with the idea.
Right, exactly. And then instantly she's like, oh, I love this song, and then just dances all just like nice and pretty like to Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah, in
the
the
moment
rain.
they just conceptualized killing her husband, it was just like,
well, she got her way, right? So she could celebrate. She got her way, and then we could work.
Well, yeah, see, and she's rewarding him. It's like a case of, again, she was literally, I mean, eventually later on, after, she literally is using sex as a tease and reward for
and
Joaquin Phoenix.
You see it actively. Like, it's essentially she's doing something to him, and and as that's happening, you see her stop and start based on getting answers from him. So it's not like she's not even trying to hide it at one point.
Well, no, but the funniest thing is she never says it, is she always just goes... She like poses questions to him and has him always come up with the answer, but she's leading him to those answers. Right, is the idea, and those answers are, "You're going to kill my husband for me."
Yeah, she invented Inception.
Yeah, she planted the idea.
She is Tom Hardy in Inception. She's just playing a million different roles and seducing everybody and being like, "Oh, you want to kill my husband? That's great." And poor Joaquin Phoenix in this movie, man. What a tragic performance.
Just the sweetest, stupidest, horniest teenager of all time.
And dude, the end line where he's just like, I wait every night to go to sleep because he dreams of her, and that's his happiest moment now is when he goes to bed. It's like the
someone
darkest,
who like straight up abused
profoundly
him.
upsetting.
Profoundly upsetting. Dude, I was like, literally in my notes, I just wrote Jesus. Like it was just like one of those. That's dark. My God.
And it's funny because it starts out as like comedy where he's watching the Weather Network. Where she's...
It really does take a tragic turn for everybody.
Where she's on the weather, and he's like, you know what? I never cared about the weather until she was there. And for some reason, he can't piece together it's because she's really hot, dude. Like, that's why you care about the weather now. It's not like you're super into the weather now or something. But
the tone, right, is really a tightrope that Van Sant walks pretty beautifully. Because it does end on so dark, but with that bizarre sort of Coen Brothers-esque optimism of
that's a good way to put it.
With Matt Dillon's sister just skating on the pond where Nicole Kidman's frozen.
Well, where she's literally frozen, like where David Cronenberg's mob hitman, who was hired by her husband's family,
and I'm pretty sure
her.
They break the fourth wall and have the sister look at you and smile, so you know that it's kind of like a wink, wink. I'm skating on this bitch, you know, like it's hilarious.
Yeah, there's something really grim and cynical about the film that the film only reveals to you slowly over time, because the tone just it totally supersedes it. Like it's funny, it's absurd.
Because it almost ends with like a Looney Tunes, like, well, that's all, folks.
And we'd be remiss not to mention the like really bright and like carnival-esque Danny Elfman score that's like straight out of Batman Returns.
Also, can I mention the absolute geniussy of going back and forth between orchestral and metal, especially in the opening credits? I was losing my shit. I couldn't even believe it. He was doing it seamlessly. It was unbelievable.
Thank you for bringing up the Danny Elfman score, though, because I knew it had to be him. My second note is literally young Tim Burton vibes.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It feels like Edward Scissorhands almost.
Dude, that's exactly what I put in my notes. That's awesome. I had that same kind of vibe. That's cool.
No, exactly.
And the score is so good. I mean, and totally makes, because if you don't have that sort of weird Danny Elfman energy, the movie is much darker, I think, from the get-go.
I agree 100%. He really brings this almost like whimsical tone to all this dark shit that's going on.
Yeah, well, because
do
you know what I kind of felt? I kind of felt it was a case of, again, because she's the center of so much of the movie, and this movie is crafted around this persona she constructed, I took it as like, again, I referred to earlier Nicole Kidman as perhaps the auteur of this film, but really I think it's because her character, who she so vividly represents, really takes over the film. That she's talking to you, she's showing us what we want to see. At one point, she's literally the person filming some of the stuff that we're seeing. So for me, that music was like, again, another sense of like this performatively bright and cheery and charisma that she just kind of has and weaponizes against people. And then the actual horrific circumstances of what those things bring because of her own need to I guess get a form of surface level success is the idea, because she doesn't need the money.
No, she seems to be set.
She's super
Matt
wealthy,
Dillon,
and clearly she doesn't think highly of all the poor kids that she's manipulating.
She wants that Patreon dollars. That's what she wants. She wants retweets and likes.
I feel that. I definitely feel that.
I'll tell you
Subscribe to the
though,
Patreon.
one of the saddest parts of this movie to me is
the young
the
girl,
fact
right?
that Allison Foland, who plays Lydia, didn't have a bigger career. She's fantastic in this, and I'm looking at her IMDb, and she never really went on to do anything.
Yeah, she plays the young girl that hangs out with right?
Yeah, exactly. She's sort of Joaquin Phoenix and Casey Affleck's friend.
Yeah, she's
but
great.
She shares a lot of really good scenes just one-on-one with Kidman.
And she's in that scene where
she's
Kidman
great.
like breaks down completely and just starts saying like, "Shut the fuck up! You're gonna fuck this up for me." It's when she's in The Wire.
That's one of the darkest moments is when she just turns off the personality for a
which
second
you've
and shows you
seen
who she is.
throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
So that moment is really just like, oh, here she is, totally unfiltered. Okay.
Well, and what's so interesting is that they all clearly latch on to her because again, like they're the kids are a little bit slower.
Yeah.
To put it mildly.
Yes. And she's very clearly manipulating them, but they also, there are in some ways ways that she herself is kind of slow. So I feel like they see her as like a model of like where they could go and get out of their own.
Yeah.
But the main difference there is she started wealthy. They did not start wealthy. And that ends up being a huge divide in that big conversation where she says, I'm going to tell them what you did. And she says, I have like a degree. I come from a nice family.
Yeah.
You guys are like cousin fuckers or whatever.
Yeah.
Who do you think that they're going to believe? Meanwhile, she's literally got a fucking wire on her for the cops. Cut back to the cops in the car who are like, they are stunned that she's just saying this.
This terrible person.
I know, how good are the cops? That's such great casting.
Yeah. And it's just so funny. Like, they just can't believe how easy it was to get her on cameras or on recording saying this shit. They're like, she's just saying her master plan, like, on camera.
And shout out to Michael Rispoli, who is Jackie Aprile in The Sopranos and plays one of the head detectives.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Who is an all-time character actor favorite of mine and has been turning in phenomenal work on The Deuce for 2 straight seasons.
Oh, I haven't started watching The Deuce yet, but I'm going to be doing that in the near future, I think.
Oh, it's great. It's really good. I big time recommend.
Sweet. All right, well, I think we're going to enter the reductive rating round and final statements here, which is if there's anything you haven't had a chance to say yet, a scene or, something you want, this is the time to do it. I know I got a couple I'm going to hit, and also where you give your rating, a number between 1 and 5. For me, this is like a pretty damn high 4.
Yeah.
I think
absolutely.
Absolutely. I think for the reasons we've already said that this is a pretty amazingly entertaining satire, as well as Nicole Kidman is absolutely phenomenal in the film. I love the bit where she's going to her own husband's funeral and she puts a fucking stereo on the coffin and blasts All By Myself.
Yeah. I had that in my notes as well. As just her ripping All By Myself and the reaction shots to the parents trying to figure out what the fuck is happening.
Oh,
is hysterical.
And to see her too in the middle of it all, just completely stone-faced, like this is such a serious moment.
I'm giving such a great performance. Everyone feels for me and how alone I am.
What the fuck? Little squint faces. Oh, that is comedy gold.
Yeah, and all of the asides that she has where she's talking about, I mean, at one point the detectives say that they are investigating, children that she was documenting as possible suspects. And she's like, it boggles one with disbelief. My documentary would be a marketable commodity if the kids did it. And it's like, okay, well, you literally manipulated the kids to do it.
Yeah.
But for me, what really stood out is just, again, this deeply constructed persona of this character, and that Nicole Kidman so vividly latched onto and realized in this pursuit of broadcast self-actualization, and how it seems that like TV in its own way and the way that she consumes images has almost like trained her to do this, and that this is what success looks like. And it really stood out to me because I mean, as Nick mentioned at the top, how it seems like almost a precursor to social media and Instagram and stuff like this. And I thought back actually to a thing.
Do you remember the video where it's some grandkid lip syncing to Justin Bieber's Baby, like in front of his grandfather's deathbed in the hospital.
do.
Do you know what I'm talking about? So Nicole Kidman blasting All By Myself at the funeral.
That's exactly what that
video.
is. No, absolutely, and I think that there is something unique about how in this film she has to pursue broadcasting to do that, whereas people don't have to pursue broadcasting to get their shit out there anymore. This is something
she would be the top Instagrammer, right?
Oh,
now,
exactly.
100%.
She would absolutely be a fucking influencer. She would have went to Fire Festival.
Yeah, Coachella every year.
If she only had an iPhone and one of those big lights that people use for selfies now, she would have been fine. She wouldn't have had to kill her husband.
Yeah, that's the beauty. The outlet now would have actually allowed her to just be the superficial, crazy person she is, and without the murdering,
Well, this is funny. This was actually something that, comedian, and I guess I have to call him a filmmaker now, Bo Burnham once pointed out when he was doing inspiration for the movie 8th Grade that he did, was the idea that, young people have now been gifted tools that people used to have to pursue, industries to get into.
Yeah.
But as a result, the tools have basically said, why doesn't everyone perform at each other all the fucking time?
Yeah.
And I thought that it was really interesting to see this idea in fucking 1995 and explored inside more traditional corporate structures where someone, is just gleefully, psychotically climbing that ladder at the expense of others. And this film really hits that satire.
The E-Network. It invented like the Kardashians too. In Nicole Kidman's dream world in this movie, she just has the Truman Show all the time.
Yeah. She yearns for the Truman Show where everyone's watching her. When the point of that movie is that he's obviously trying to escape this hollow reality where he can't get real relationships out of it.
But she would flourish.
Oh yeah. So. She was made for it. But so anyway, that's why this for me, I think it hits that point really, really hard. And also I think Gus Van Sant's, formal control over this, walking that, as Nick pointed out, that really thin line between, something grim and cynical, and, eventually murderous, and, packaging it in something lighter and something more fun, in the same way that Nicole Kidman is herself. Again, she is, this sort of, vicious character bottled up inside something that is, much more surface and much more performative. And I think that his film actually does the same thing that the character does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Shout out Gus Van Sant. What a king.
Yeah.
We love Gus Van Sant, don't we, folks?
Yep.
I can't believe I've never even really heard of this movie, to be honest. It
should be a higher rated Gus Van Sant movie for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's funny to me is I remember back in the day of video stores that this was a movie that the cover was sort of a very sultry picture of Kidman, which I think was used as the poster and was always sort of positioned as like a very, probably closer to porn, honestly, was how they made it look. And so to finally watch this, it's like, oh, this movie's hysterical. Like this is a comedy. This is it makes sense that Reese Witherspoon said this was one of her biggest influences for Election.
Oh yeah, 100%.
For Tracy Flick.
I
mean, it's that same sort of nihilistic comedy.
For sure. For you though, Jamie.
I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 as well. It was a very high one. I enjoyed this movie thoroughly from beginning to end. Just a couple little moments I liked that Van Sant did. One was one I mentioned already, that zoom in focus on Matt Dillon when she kind of like what you said, becomes the Terminator in a way after she's told no for the first time. That attention
that ruled.
It was great. I loved getting into her mindset like that. She's hyper focused on getting rid of him now. And then another awesome little filmmaking moment was when she was waiting for the teenagers to come to her house, and she just does a circle in the living room, and as that happens, it goes from day to night. As if she's so, once again, just so focused on the plan that she's going to sit here until she can enact the next step of that plan. And that's just the attention to detail there.
It's awesome. Well, and actually, you just reminded me of the one thing I forgot to mention, which I don't know how I forgot to mention, because Nick actually tweeted out an image of this that I thought was my favorite part of the fucking movie, is the actual scene where they kill Matt Dillon.
Yeah, and she's right on TV.
When she is marking her alibi by doing the weather, but she's also doing the weather with like that look, that determined look in her eyes that everyone can see.
And just to add that little darkness to shout out the first year anniversary between them and then go, night, honey. Yeah. The moment he gets shot in the head, it's just
ice cold.
Ice cold, exactly.
But that image of her face on the TV in the background as Casey Affleck and Joaquin Phoenix are in the house, like pointing the gun at Matt Dillon, the way that he composes that shot to have her face and her wildly determined eyes. Eventually, the TV, this shot doesn't even make sense for broadcast television. It's a literal extreme close-up of her eyes.
You're like, why is this camera?
Which I love. I love those choices, too.
Because
the aesthetic choices in this movie.
Like that's a heightened moment of like that doesn't make sense in the reality of broadcast television, but like you feel like that's what Joaquin Phoenix is feeling, that she is like laser focused on him, like you have to do this. And do you know what it reminded me of? Fucking Basic Instinct.
Oh yeah,
because that great scene where Michael Douglas is having the conversation with the cops when they're about to interrogate her inside, and there is the shot of Sharon Stone on the TV in the background where they're about to interrogate her. And like she's in control. She's watching over what they're saying, what they're doing.
I didn't even make that until now. That's awesome.
And I remember when we did Basic Instinct with Danny Bose that we really highlighted that shot about how in control she was of the situation. And they do that same shot here where she's literally controlling these people to murder her husband.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's even more like emotional and even more, like I was gonna say like visceral,
dreamlike.
That's a good way. to
Well, speaking of that too, was the moment where they kind of do that again, but now it's you're in Joaquin's head, is when he's watching the weather, and then she starts saying hypersexualized stuff all of a sudden, and they do that same thing where it's zooming in on her face.
That was fantastic.
Yeah,
really,
so
that was very funny.
Yeah, it's like that satirical aspect, and then we see it later when it's complete, just dark and murderous. So I there's so much to this film. I really didn't expect it to be
him having a relationship with her TV personality is like kind of like him just being horny, and then all of a sudden he's murdering someone.
He was horny on main. This is why you don't DM people, because you end up in a murder plot.
Exactly.
Seriously,
get out of those DMs, folks.
but I'm gonna give it a high 4, and it was great.
I mean, I love this movie. That's I think definitely a high 4 for me as well. I kept finding myself shouting "Only in America" while watching this movie. I mean, this to me is such sort of people. It's that meme, right, where people are always saying, "This is the movie we need now." Well, this actually is the movie we need now.
Yeah.
But Gus Van Sant was kind enough to make it for us in 1995. So I'll just run down the list of just some quick stuff. Ben Affleck in Gone Girl has big time Matt Dillon energy.
Yep.
I forget who says it, but whoever delivers the line "bonding sexually," so to speak, is so funny, and that's going to be a new go-to line for me. I think it's in reference to them on their honeymoon, but just the sort of matter-of-fact delivery of they were bonding sexually, so to speak, was hysterical. We already mentioned
emptiness.
Well, it's like that one where he's like, they tell Joaquin Phoenix that Casey Affleck told the cops that his dick was bigger than his brain. And Joaquin Phoenix is proud. He's like, did he really say that? That's great.
He said that.
And then the cop says even something like, "That wasn't like a compliment, bro."
They were like, "He's saying you're a fucking moron and that you murdered." So like Joaquin Phoenix does not understand the gravity of the situation.
All he cares about is the sex with Kidman. It's just like, oh man,
it's great.
Oh, so funny.
But shout out David Cronenberg as a mob hitman,
absolutely,
which we already hit. Also, big time shout out to Kurtwood Smith, who you know from RoboCop as well as That 70s Show.
Absolutely.
And Holland Taylor, the GOAT, who could we forget is a star-making turn in countless movies, but always will love her in Legally Blonde. So love Holland Taylor. Shout out to them. I think the line that Lydia says, I think it's Lydia, but someone says, this is just like a movie, but X-rated on account of the sex stuff. Also, great line.
Yeah, because and Lydia too. She's also the one who has the very end of the movie where she gets I'm the one that's going to be famous now.
Right.
And Suzanne would die if she knew, which was
which is
huge,
right when she's
huge.
being killed.
We just talked about it. Female Trouble vibes. where it was like,
hell yeah.
whereas like Infamy is its own kind of success. By the end of the film. So,
I'd also like to say, I think a bit of the
again,
moral
this lady
here-
got a movie made out of a book written about her, and then a movie made out of her. So maybe they aren't wrong.
I also think a bit of the lesson here is at the end of this film is don't fuck with Italians. As well.
Well, yeah,
So-
that's all. That's always the
That's
lesson
just
of
a little,
every movie,
a little
I think.
thing that they threw in there.
I'm not sure. I didn't do good research, so I'm not sure who edited this movie, but whoever did, one did just a great job in general, but has a absolute perfect sense of humor, at least to my sensibilities. And some of the cuts in this movie I thought were just so funny. Just
so you
about,
know, it was Curtis Clayton who also edited Buffalo 66 and Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
So he knows what he's doing on the sticks, but the cut from, I think when she's giving Joaquin Phoenix a blowjob, I believe, to Matt Dillon's parents putting up the "still going strong after 1 year" sign had me howling. That is an all-time cut, and also too what you just said at the end of the movie. The cut of Lydia saying she would just die if she knew this too. Literally Nicole Kidman frozen in ice.
Where David Cronenberg just put her.
So good.
Is too funny.
Poetic.
Great shit.
And I think the last thing, which I said to you, Josh, was Nicole Kidman in this movie go on Red Scare.
Yes.
I think she would be a perfect guest.
Absolutely. That reference means nothing to Jamie, but that's okay. We'll move on.
You can explain after.
That's like extremely online brain right there. So
yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah, that's a podcast that's had some controversy about being these like really performative rich white girls a little bit. So.
I gotcha.
But I think that will wrap it up for To Die For, and I think we're going to be right back, and we are going to be talking A Perfect Murder.
Michael Douglas.
I want $500,000, tax-free.
Just for walking away from her?
I said tax-free. I didn't say free.
What's 500 grand for?
Killing my wife.
It's an ironic title, though, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't go well.
It's not a perfect murder for sure.
A convoluted murder.
Yeah.
A not great Bob murder. All right.
Vigo's never looked better though.
Hire a real hitman next time, murderer.
Yeah. I guess we'll just jump right into it. All right, we are back and we are talking A Perfect Murder. You should leave that in.
Yep, we are.
We're back and we're talking A Perfect Murder, which is a 1998 American crime thriller film with I guess a tiny bit of eroticism.
I was going to say erotic. I mean, don't be afraid to put it in there. They're definitely leaning into it for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a 90s movie and it does star Michael Douglas, so that's, you're halfway there already.
Yeah.
And the film also, though, stars Gwyneth Paltrow and Viggo Mortensen, primarily in a reimagining, reinterpretation, remake of one Alfred Hitchcock film, Dial M for Murder.
It's just funny that this is what it's just funny that this is what IP was before movie studios realized they could do like comic book movies.
Yeah.
They're like,
remake a Hitchcock movie.
Yeah. It's like, what do the people want? A remake of a Hitchcock movie,
but with like some, a little bit of sexiness in there.
Yeah. With Douglas.
Well, apparently the people did, right? I mean, that's why I think you got to call it an erotic thriller, because it just makes it all the more insane that it had a budget of $60 million and then somehow made $128 million at the box office. If this comes out today, this makes probably $20 million.
Yeah,
I would guess,
easily.
Right?
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't think it comes anywhere close to $100 million at the box office.
And it's a shame. I mean, really, the only things that do make it now are the franchise films. It's You don't
Right.
see many mid-tier films like this.
Right,
Well,
and I mean,
you don't see them at all, let alone successful.
Like the only
ones.
thing this had going for it was that it would be a remake of like a film that people like, but they didn't even
Right.
use the same title.
Right, so no one would really know. Like I didn't know until I started.
They really
seeing
just regurgitated
reviews where
the plot.
people were like, yeah, because people started telling me that it was a Hitchcock remake, but I didn't. I wouldn't have known if I just watched the movie. So
This was before Shakespeare in Love, right?
I think so.
Yeah, because Gwyneth Paltrow is definitely in that sort of, pre-awards pocket, but where she was clearly people wanted her in stuff.
yeah,
And,
Oh, do you know what? Same year as Shakespeare in Love.
wow, what a flex then by Gwen. That's epic. What a back-to-back then.
yeah, that's pretty sweet.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is really for me. This is Michael Douglas doing the same shit again. I mean, he's coming off Basic Instinct from '93,
Yeah.
and then he did David Fincher's The Game in '97, in which he basically lives in the exact same universe as this movie as a hedge fund manager.
Potentially is the same character.
Yeah,
Seriously, like just before he
An
decided to
unofficial
murder
sequel.
his wife.
we imagine at the end of the game, he starts putting his life back on track. He decides to get married. He marries Gwyneth Paltrow. Everything's great. As we see
until
in the feature
beginning
film,
of this film.
a perfect murder. His relationship is great. Everything's great about it.
Yeah.
That's the end of the movie. It's two rich people. One's a hedge fund manager. One, I think, they never really explain where her money comes from, but she seemingly has, a giant trust fund that's even worth more than Michael Douglas's character's hedge fund.
It's funny that you say that too.
And then you do the stinger where she sees Vigo right at the very end. That's the post-credit sequence.
God damn,
That's the
that's a
setup.
hot Kurt Cobain looking motherfucker over there.
It's funny that you do say the whole like we were just a successful rich couple or whatever, because at the end he has that line where he says, "We're just another married couple, just trying to work things out."
Yeah.
After she finds out everything
Just
he's
with
been
millions and
plotting to
millions
do.
of dollars,
Yeah.
and that we would be willing to
Look,
kill each
I'm
other
sorry
for.
I tried to murder you. It's just a rough patch. We'll work around it.
Yeah, and they're living in the most preposterous apartment I've
Oh
ever
my
seen. too.
God, yeah.
It's an apartment. Like,
Yeah, it literally
Jesus.
looks like his house in the game, which is like a literal
seems like
mansion
it's
on
3
the
floors.
outskirts. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yet they're you can tell that they're on like in a condo building. Yet you know it's just like it's the size somehow of a mansion. There's their condo. You're just like, how is this possible? It's ridiculous.
Also, how about the guy who was famous for playing Poirot? That has to be an inside joke, right? Or maybe even not even that inside as the detective.
The guy. Shit, what's the actor's name?
I think David Suchet.
Yes.
think I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's what he was famous for, was playing the world's greatest detective, and they have him essentially being a much sharper detective than I believe most NYPD detectives to be. And also too, how about pre 9/11? They actually Hollywood let a Muslim or a Muslim character be a good guy. I was like, couldn't do that anymore.
Well, it's used as like a bit of connection between him and Gwyneth Paltrow, right? Who is some sort of like assistant for the U.S. representative at the UN.
Yeah,
so like
it happens that she speaks the language as well.
Yeah, well, because I think that's part of being at the UN is
Yeah.
you're trying to work out deals with other people. So
He's literally the one like compassionate person in the movie. He's like the one like human being who doesn't want something from Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they like immediately like she takes an interest in his family life, and and I do think it's interesting where things eventually go, or were supposed to go with this whole thing, because you're right that Gwyneth is like like the the one sort of character who is kind of in the being she seems very, I would say, sincere. In a lot of the actions that she's partaking in.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone on either side of her, Michael Douglas and Viggo Mortensen in particular, have alternative motives basically for everything that
like
they're
with
doing.
Vito, like because with Douglas it's like, okay, you're a piece of shit. With Vito, it's like he's trying to convince himself that he's not a piece of shit, and but do you know what I'm trying to say? Because it's like he's
Vigo's
still
almost
claiming that he
in
has
too deep.
love for her, but he still sets it up in a way that he could get the money and have her killed. It's just he's not going to personally do it.
Yeah.
He's definitely fighting some demons there.
He was like, I couldn't do it because I loved her, but I could hire someone to do it.
I still need that $100,000, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for anyone who hasn't seen the film, because I actually hadn't heard of the film before Nick brought it on, but I was very glad to get a chance to see it.
Yeah.
This is weirdly one of my mom's favorite movies, so this is how I know about it. This DVD was always floating around our house growing up.
This seems like a movie that my mom would like too. So this movie's got mom energy for sure.
This has big time glass of white wine energy for sure.
Absolutely.
But also, how about shout out to Vigo for apparently almost all of those paintings he did himself.
Yep,
in the studio.
Yep. And the speaking of which, I guess we should the plot here: Viggo Mortensen, con man, but also pretty good painter. And I find that's fun. That's one of the funniest parts of the movie is when Michael Douglas, who approaches him, and he immediately has already done the research and knows that he's a con man and that he attaches himself to rich women to try and con his way into their lives and into their money, and then he leaves.
Yeah.
But he immediately approaches her and he's like, wow, or approaches Vigo and he's like, wow, I actually understand why you're good at what you do because you actually don't have a bad brush hand. Like your paintings are pretty good for a guy who's faking being a painter.
Too, he even says that he has anger that's controlled. So it kind of would lead to his personality and what he's doing behind the scenes and all that.
Yeah, and that he's a trash. I mean, I love the bit that he describes his paintings. It describes the movie where he's like, your paintings are trashy,
like a king of trash or something like that. Yeah,
yeah. He's very, very Basquiat wannabe. He's just dunking on Vigo, but they don't look bad for a guy who learned to paint in prison. Ostensibly, right? Because that's what he says they say. For sure. Yeah, he learned to paint in prison. I was like, well, they must have had at least a couple books in there then, because these do look pretty good.
Yeah, no, for real. And Vigo's trying to con his way into Gwyneth Paltrow's vicinity, who is married to Michael Douglas's sort of millionaire industrialist, hedge fund manager guy.
And essentially just Gordon Gekko.
Yes, the same guy. Right? Again, basically from 89 to 2000, he played the same character.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Rich dick.
It's almost great every time.
Hair. It's the hair has big time cocaine energy, and he just, no one sort of personified that slimy. You feel like she should always be wearing suspenders. How I would describe him. I remember in a stretch of time.
I remember when we watched Basic Instinct, and I think around when we did Basic Instinct, and I also watched The Game because I was trying to get into 90s Michael Douglas mode. Yeah. And I remember watching those, and I remember texting my mom, being someone who was peak watching movies in the 90s when they were coming out. Right. That was when she was watching movies. I was just was Michael Douglas sexy? Was he hot? Was he the guy? Because I look at him now and I'm kind of I don't know. I mean, he's got a commanding presence.
See, that's what I thought it might be.
People he's definitely a sex sort of icon in these movies for sure.
Yeah, but it feels like in a weird corporate daddy kind of way though.
That's what I feel like. It's more power than it is actual just physical.
He's not Chris Hemsworth. He ain't that kind of thing.
There's no scene where he takes off his shirt in his giant penthouse.
And Gwyneth Paltrow's damn, dude, that's why I can't leave you.
That's 5-year-old man.
Which is funny too, right? Which goes sort of hand in hand with what we're saying, that they just don't make these movies anymore. Is as you just said, the sex symbols now is Chris Hemsworth. It's not Michael Douglas's paunch under his Oxford shirt.
Oh, like someone, an actor equivalent to Michael Douglas today would be completely character actor roles.
Yeah.
Entirely.
There's no one, there's no leading man.
I couldn't even think of a correlation, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is. Because it's just, they're not making these films anymore. It really just, it doesn't happen.
He would be starring on a Showtime series or maybe an HBO. You know what I mean? It would be the type of vehicles for the roles that Michael Douglas played. It's essentially the closest sort of comparison I could think of would be Damian Lewis in Billions, honestly.
Great show.
Great
you
performance.
That, right?
Yeah. Josh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like Damian Lewis. Damian Lewis actually is a good equivalent to maybe like what something like Michael Douglas is doing, because Damian Lewis isn't like a traditionally good-looking man either. My mom actually can't watch Billions because I tried to get her to watch it, but she can't she can't stand looking at his face. There's just something creepy about it. But
great eyebrows.
But Paul Giamatti on that show,
the lips
though.
that pissed me off.
Ooh, what's that?
Is he the guy that does he have another show? Sorry to sidetrack.
Yeah, he has Homeland. Is it
Homeland?
Yeah.
I
He's
have
the guy
that
on Homeland.
same thing that your mom has, where I can't stand his face. That's hilarious. I just had to throw that in there. That's so funny. Sorry, no offense to that actor. I'm sure he's fine.
Damian Lewis, yeah.
Yeah, our bad.
No relationship to me, but that's all good. But yeah, they don't make this mid-budget movie at large, but they're also not making erotic thrillers like this anymore. I mean, like in the 90s, there was like a whole slew of these. You had like, I mean, it started in the 80s, I guess, with like Fatal Attraction. Shit, you had Wild Things. You had.
I mean, the opening credits are Viggo and Gwyneth Paltrow having sex. I mean, that's the opening credits. Those are two megastars, and I couldn't imagine a movie opening like that.
Well, I mean, David Cronenberg did his own weirdo version of it with Crash, using James Spader and Holly Hunter shortly after, like, Secretary with James Spader in that as well. But then you also had, like, super trash versions of this. I mean, Billy Baldwin was in one with Sharon Stone called Sliver, which I don't know if either of you heard of that one.
I've never seen that.
I'm looking up
fortunately, I think
that's one where Billy Baldwin has like owns an entire apartment complex where he constantly watches all of his people on the security cameras, and Sharon Stone is like one of the people who lives in his building, and like it's this really like creepy voyeuristic aspect to it. I mean, it's pure trash. Like I don't even know that I'd have to rewatch it, but I don't know that I could go to bat for it even as like good trash. Even, but it's just like
that makes me want to watch it.
It's the way that they kind of recycled very similar looks, which was, you know, these kind of lavish condos, apartments, and houses, this like very sort of like steamy, sweaty, like passionate melodrama,
with just horrible relationships
combined with like, you know, this really suspenseful plotting, basically, where, you know, there's a murder and they're like, ooh, it's sex and violence together. And all the little moms and dads out there are like, fuck, I'm hard. That's what did it. The premise alone. And for 10 years they could just make nothing but these movies.
They're just airport paperbacks. You just crank them out, right? And they're pretty straightforward too. And that's what I liked about this movie, honestly, revisiting it, was just sort of how straightforward the plan was.
This movie is almost entirely plotting. It's pretty nuts. Like I couldn't believe it. How many conversations people, like how many twists this eventually had to it. I couldn't believe how fast Michael Douglas was already trying to hire the guy to kill his wife. Because I went into this blind.
Yeah.
And like when he goes to hire Viggo Mortensen to kill his wife, it's like the first like 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes of setup and then just all plot.
Yeah, because most of the time when you see this kind of plot, the first 20 minutes is the setup to the cheating.
Yeah.
And then, but instead they're just like, nope, they're already cheating, and now we start the murder plot. It is really right away, which I did find interesting. And it pulls you in right away too. Because some of the time, I mean, I'm not
you're waiting,
that concerned.
You're just waiting.
Yeah, because I'm like, I want the plotting to start happening with these kind of films. So it was cool that they were just like, you know what? Let's just start this murder plot. Let's get it going.
Well, it's funny too, right? Because we were talking about the director earlier, who has directed some very good movies. Like, I think The Fugitive is awesome. Mm-hmm. And then Under Siege is like, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have seen Under Siege quite a few times on
Under
VHS.
Siege is on our future watch list. It's like a Steven Seagal one. So
and so like he knows where to put the camera, right? It's like he knows blocking, which a lot of people don't know how to do anymore.
For sure.
But it looks like kind of anonymous too.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's sort of just style.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is like my main note about like this movie, which is both a negative and a positive for me, is that this is just an incredibly competent movie.
Yeah,
like through and through. Yeah. Like this is exactly what it is.
I'm interested in why it would be a negative. Like does it bore you in that sense? Because it's not quite.
I would just say that I don't think it takes the extra leap into, for example, if we're going to compare this to other erotic thrillers or even just other 90s thrillers, you know, like if we were to compare this to something like Basic Instinct, I don't think that this gets as perversely horny and violent as something like Basic Instinct done, which again is another Hitchcock riff, but done where like Michael Douglas's sexuality is like a full blown. He is just a horny
hyper-tense,
psychopath by the end, and the actual murders in that movie are. I mean, here they get pretty grim too, but like there's
the thermometer to the throat is
it's a bit,
I forgot about that.
It actually was more violent than I anticipated and bloody when it does make that turn. But I also felt that because of its competency, it kind of just it does its plot, and it wasn't to me as as clever as something like the anxious simulated playground of something like The Game, which is like Fincher going full formal trickster on his character and the audience. And this doesn't have that either. This just has a baseline competence, which works for it. Yeah. And I think makes the movie like why I like it, but is also...
Especially having Douglas, like he's such a powerful presence.
Yeah, but by the end, when we do get to like the final ending of the film, I did feel like it kind of just, it did go through the motions competently of what this ending should look like. Although I did read, and we'll get to it maybe when we do get to the end here, that it has an alternate ending.
Oh, really? I saw that too. And I think would have been more interesting.
Amazing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the alternate ending would have played much better, but being the 90s, I'm sure the studio focus tested this to death.
100%. I mean, maybe we should get through more of the movie, but we will circle back to this and tell you what it is, because you will be blown away. I was going to mention
a couple things where Douglas turns by the end, but I'll save it because there's two moments in particular that are just kind of... Well, one is just, I think, a reference, and then the other one is legitimately fucking hilarious. So I'll save it.
But anyway, let's jump into, so we've already talked about the fact that Michael Douglas, sort of like this hedge fund millionaire who's having some problems with some stocks. He's getting a little financially desperate, and he found out that his wife didn't get a prenup, and his wife has like is worth $100 million in her trust fund or whatever.
Casual.
Yeah, just casual. Which actually is a kind of a unique reveal, because I didn't expect that when they revealed the fact that she's actually the more rich person of the two.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that until they actually brought that up.
Which plays great into the idea that Michael Douglas views her as a piece of art that he's collected, right? The fact that she has
value, financial value,
is why he wants her to just be in the apartment like the statue.
Yeah,
she's worth $100 million, and that's why she's so appealing.
Which falls even to that beginning where she's about to put on a dress, and he's like, "No, I want you to wear that dress."
Yeah,
it's like, it's a constant control. Where that's the perfect way to put it, is that she's like a piece of art that he gets to almost dress up and show off to everybody, and yeah, it's some dark shit.
Yeah, and the plot really kicks in when she's caught cheating on Michael Douglas with Viggo Mortensen, who is a con man trying to also use her for her money, but posing as, like this real deal, city artist, painter. And he's got the flannel, he's got like the huge open space warehouse apartment looking motherfucker where he does his work.
An artist's
dream. Yeah, somehow looks beautiful, yet is also a complete dump.
Yeah, he's got like that the long hair and the stubble and the flannel, and he's doing he's trying. It's almost like he's posing in that like 90s grunge scene a little
definitely.
bit, right? And when he gets caught doing that and Michael Douglas catches him, Michael Douglas is like, okay, well, you're a con man, you're in this for the money, so here's the thing.
I think it's an important distinction, though, that I picked up this time watching it, is that they say that all the other women that Viggo's conned have been older widows. And so to me, I took that as Gwyneth. The reason why he had the extra feelings was she's the first, attractive woman he's actually done this to.
Right, like it's not for Viggo, it is not purely financial.
Yeah,
but because again, they're just hot people having sex. It's not going to be there's going to get feelings caught up in that inherently.
Tough job that Viggo has to
do. And Michael Douglas makes him an offer, $500,000 for you to go away, but while you go away, you also have to kill my wife. And he's just like, oh, I mean, I guess okay.
I need that money.
Yep. So and what ensues is, kind of Michael Douglas, who has been clearly hatching this plan for some time. He has it set up. He's just been looking for the right guy who has the motivation to actually want to do it. And he sets up this hugely convoluted plan where he has the perfect alibi by going out for poker night where he's going to place a call into his business at the exact time that someone is going to break into his house and murder his wife. And he leaves the key outside the door so that the Viggo Mortensen can come in and he can use the key and he can get her in the shower. But one amazing touch that happens here is that Michael Douglas wasn't satisfied with that. He has to fucking call the house and get her out of the tub.
Yeah.
Because
I know.
Here's the thing.
He just couldn't let him. That's how big of a control freak he is. He was micromanaging his wife's murder.
Yeah. No, 100%. Because here's the thing. If he had just let the person, like, actually, sneak in and kill her in the bathtub, she probably would have been shocked and wouldn't have been able to do anything.
Oh, yeah.
But because he freaked her out by calling her and put her on edge where she's on the phone, it was immediately more reactive and already, had better reflexes by the time the guy actually does approach her.
Yep.
And puts a meat thermometer into his neck, which spurts blood
Great
everywhere.
kill. Very sort of slasher-esque.
Yep.
Yeah, it
Very.
really is.
Yeah, and I mean blood everywhere.
Yeah, just
for
starts
real.
squirting just directly out. It's
like all over her
visceral.
white robe and everything,
Yeah.
her bathrobe.
Like when Oren beheads the dude in Kill Bill.
Yes.
That sort of geyser of blood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
just everywhere. And I mean, she eventually passes out into the pool of blood.
Yeah, which is and kind of a very dark and in this weird way, like romantic image, because at first you think it's Vito, which will reveal that it isn't. But at first you think it is, so it's this weird thing where they've struggled and fought, and then she had to kill him, and then they pass out, and she's like in his arms, almost as if what we saw in the first scene where they're in bed together. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if that's what they were going for. But
No, I think partially.
No, for sure. That was definitely intentional.
yeah. And then it, of course, we reveal it's not Vito, and you're just like, that's where the plot really thickens.
Yeah, because they one of my favorite bits in this is that Michael Douglas comes back and he because for God's sake, dude, he had to listen to the murder on the phone call. Like he just wanted to hear her strangled.
Maniac move.
Yeah.
Very Patrick Bateman-esque.
Yeah, which is funny because of his outfit later in the movie. Which is
that was one of the things I had to reference.
Which I looked up. This preempted that in American Psycho.
No way.
Yeah, it did.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
So
I was like, wow,
that's cool.
Michael Douglas,
the OG,
a serial killing icon.
But
that's
when,
awesome.
When he gets back and he sees that the kill has gone wrong and that Gwyneth is like on the phone already calling the cops are on the way, and he thinks that it's Viggo who's under who's dead with a meat thermometer in his neck in his kitchen. He immediately does that. There's like this suspense sequence where he pulls the gloves out of the kitchen, the kitchen drawer, and he takes a screwdriver. He simulates a break-in because he can't have the fact that this guy got murdered and she fended him off.
Yeah.
But he used a key to get in
I
because that
also
doesn't make
love
sense.
how quickly he does this.
Oh,
where
yeah.
he's just like,
no hesitation.
Shit, my plan A didn't work. Go. Like it's like it is almost like he had it all set up in case it didn't go correctly. But at the same time, I feel like his character is just kind of that determined and that sharp. And that's really what led him there.
Yeah, no, and it is that classic case of you're actually watching people who are mildly intelligent people kind of like go back and forth. So this does turn into a case of when he grabs like when he pulls the key immediately out of the dude's pocket and puts it back onto her on
quick thinking his part.
Very quick thinking,
Yeah.
and then the way that this all comes back later in the film, when the fact that she tries the key out on their apartment later in the film, and it turns out that the key that he took from the guy's pocket wasn't the key to their apartment, but the key to the killer's apartment, who was a guy who Viggo hired, someone that he met at Berkeley randomly. So
because he gives that great line to Michael Douglas where he's like, next time, why don't you be a man and do your own wet work? Which I just thought was very funny. And I almost took as a reference to Under Siege because I was like, does Michael Douglas even understand the term wet work? I mean, does he understand like what he's saying?
Yeah. No, for real. Well, and also it's funny because he's also hiring someone to kill someone for him too.
Yeah.
So he's just like getting mad at someone for hiring someone else to do the job.
You just did that, bro, and you took my money.
Yeah.
Well, so to me too, these two movies and why I wanted to pair them together, A Perfect Murder and To Die For, is I view them as, this is A Perfect Murder is sort of the straight-faced version of To Die For. Right. It's doing it the straight way, but more importantly, it shows the difference in class too, right? Because it's in A Perfect Murder, it's in Little Hope, New Hampshire. It's as low stakes as it gets. And what I kept thinking about while watching A Perfect Murder was, man, it's much easier to murder your spouse if you start out rich, because then you can hire like private detectives and stuff. It's like the difference.
This is both about
planning.
murdering your wife or your spouse. I guess it's your husband and
the
other
spouse,
one.
But it's like it's Nicole Kidman's convincing, who seems to be like a challenged teenager to do this. And Michael Douglas has seemingly an army of private detectives setting this up for him.
No, 100%. And then the rest of the film becomes a little bit of like marriage as manipulation, because some of the back and forth here get really interesting where, Gwyneth is obviously on edge. She starts suspecting Michael Douglas. And there's one scene where she figures out that key scenario, sits in his office and confronts him. She's basically ready to be like, you fucking let him in. Like why is the key to the killer on my thing? And that scene is incredible to me, where he takes that and he's prepared for that response somehow.
Yeah, right. He's gone crazy.
Yeah.
And I
have plans on top of plans.
Yeah.
Right. And I just realized they set up his backup plan within the first 10-15 minutes of the movie, where they
print
have that
off
envelope
that little,
and the picture, and he doesn't use that until Gwyneth is like, "You're the guy that set this up." He's had this he had a plan C basically.
Yeah, he had a backup plan to incriminate someone else basically to basically turn Gwyneth against Vigo, as Vigo is actually the actor here who is blackmailing and murdering, not me.
Right. Yeah.
They're constantly trying to flip who the mastermind is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the way that they start that scene where he walks in and she has the upper hand sitting in his chair in his office being like, you're the one. And the way that he just schemes his way around to not only her being on his side, her apologizing to him.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe what my cheating, put you under, what kind of stress, what kind of, and then she's like, is this the reason you're having financial trouble? Because you're paying this guy off because of blackmail? And he's like,
and I like how he's like, well, I hadn't considered that, but
exactly.
Sure. Yeah,
I love that bit because he was like, I actually wasn't even going to go that far, but you put that together.
You just added a whole other thing to my plan. Thanks for making this even stronger.
Yeah. So watching the way that, and you get to see Michael Douglas do this from almost like a POV point of view. We are let in on Michael Douglas's point of view from the beginning of this film.
Watching him be this chameleon, it's unreal.
Yeah, and the way that he uses people, the way that he manipulates people.
What's better than his voice too? His voice is just the best.
Demanding. Yeah,
it's what I said earlier today. His phone acting is 10 out of 10. No one acts over the phone quite like Michael Douglas.
No, absolutely. Every single 90s movie he's in, he's got that big ass phone going.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, that scene was when I was most into this movie, was when he flips the tables on Gwyneth and gets him back on his side, and then starts scheming with her against Vigo. And working that out. But then Vigo kind of complicates that too. And, so all of this, this Perfect Murder turns into this is obviously ironic title. It turns into this hugely convoluted situation where, multiple people are vying for multiple situations. And I will say that it was eventually the finale of this film, which is what kind of let me down a little bit, was because I did think that the end result of this was, he eventually continues to scheme. They have another big breakdown, actually in the house.
Yeah,
where,
they have an actual scuffle and everything.
Yeah, where Vigo has recorded the conversation of him describing, how, to kill her best. And he sends that, not only does he pay $400,000, or he gets $400,000 from Michael Douglas to get that tape in hand, which I don't know how he wasn't smart enough to think that obviously he was going to mail another copy.
Yeah.
Also, can I just say, listen, I've never seen $400,000 in cash, but I don't think it could all fit in one shoebox.
No, that's 100%.
I just gotta say that was the only part of this movie that stretched my believability.
But I will say also this movie does feature a train sequence, so automatically at cinema I have this rule where if the movie has a train in it for some capacity, it's immediately it's not a movie anymore, it's cinema. Yeah,
a great train sequence too, a great sort of train climax.
Yeah, where Vigo gets the money, he escapes on the train. And Michael Douglas comes out in his American Psycho getup.
Yeah, which is awesome to know that he
great
was the first to do it now.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. For some reason, this movie has one jump scare in it, and that's Michael Douglas comes out of nowhere.
And just stabs Vigo viciously.
And he does it in that
I
scene.
could not figure out how he got in there. I was like, this man is David Copperfield. I was like, he had to have been crouched in there for at least a half an hour beforehand.
Well, and they set it up, too, because they do that one earlier where he disappears in the crowd.
These were the two things that I was going to reference. That part made me laugh so fucking hard. He Spider-Man 3's him. It's just so funny. I reference it, when Franco does it in Spider-Man 3.
Oh, right.
When he gives him a little wink and then he's gone because of the truck. I couldn't believe they just did this in A Perfect Murder. Like, Michael Douglas is just in a park with his fucking, overcoat. And he's just
gone.
And I'm gone.
He's like
he's
Batman. He just throws down the smoke bomb. And he's out of there.
Yeah,
Bruce Wayne's the fuck out of there.
And not only that, there's, literally 10 moments in this film where Gwyneth Paltrow looks behind her and is shocked to see Michael Douglas, who's somehow appeared in the room.
He's supernatural being eventually. It's hilarious.
They use the same shock scare 10 times.
Yeah.
And then finally they do use it for great effect because he uses it finally, and it's to gut Viggo Mortensen. And I love that Viggo Mortensen is just in his dying breath, he's still kind of an asshole. He's just like, look, I mailed the tape.
Great sort of final fuck you by Viggo.
Yeah, he immediately
These guys are just relentless.
He immediately runs home, intercepts the package, and puts it into his safe so that Gwyneth can't open it and hear, the tape of him, confirming how, the killer was going to murder her. And he goes, and of course, in typical fashion, he takes that steamy shower. Yeah. That just really steamy shower.
I know, that gets him every time.
Yeah.
He's really got to learn to
He's got to stop.
To make sure the plan has in fact worked before taking
or
the shower.
At least put the fucking bag in the safe. Dude, you went through all of this meticulous planning, and you've gotten through every little thing. You even got through 3 times she believed that you were the one that tried to kill her, and you've made her believe that you're the innocent one, and then the only thing you did was leave the bag in the living room. That's what got you in trouble.
Well, and also just
come on, Douglas.
Also conspicuously just not greeting her when he came in the first place. I thought
definitely raises
she wouldn't have noticed the bag or the package probably if he had just put the package into the bag and set the bag down even just in front of her and then walked up to her or something like that.
If he hadn't been so weird.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what got him. He was just he clearly looked like he had just killed Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah, and he drew attention to the safe, and then she was like, "Obviously, I know the combination to the safe. It's our fucking wedding day, you moron,
dude."
And they have this final confrontation where she's heard it, she's seen the money, she knows what's happened. She even confronts him about the key, the fact they should change the locks because she doesn't have the key, and he goes immediately and grabs the fucking key, revealing that he knew where the key was. Yeah. And then she's like, okay, you fucking did it's done. You did this. And the craziest part is that this ending for me was so weak where she just goes, I'm going to tell on you. And she goes to leave, and then he assaults her, and then she shoots him. And
that's it.
That's it. The police come and they're just like, it was self-defense. You had nothing that you could do, I guess. That's
the good, strong cut to credits. Strong cut to credits, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. That cut to credits, for me, it didn't hit as hard because the moment didn't hit as hard, but in that alternate ending, that moment
works
would
much
fucking
better.
Smash.
It's time to explain that alternate ending.
Okay, so let's do it. So let me lay out this alternate ending for you. So the final confrontation plays out basically the same, where the evidence stacks up that she understands what Michael Douglas has done. They have a confrontation, but the scene actually plays out in the kitchen instead of in the foyer there.
Okay, so where the original killing happened.
Yes, and he never assaults her at all. He basically
just shoots him.
Like, yeah, he basically just says, like, what are you gonna do? Like, you can't prove this. Like, we're married.
The classic internet joke where he's like, "What are you gonna do? Shoot me?" And then she shoots him.
Yeah, and basically, apparently, in that alternate ending, you know, he tells her that the only way you're gonna get out of this is like over my dead body, basically. And she pulls out the gun and just fucking point blank murders him.
Oh damn! Okay.
And then this is the real kicker, because while he's bleeding out, he says, "You won't get away with this." And what she does, she stages it to look like self-defense. She harms herself. Like, she basically starts scratching herself. She does like that fucking kid in Scream 4 who like they like jump into like the glass table and they like break their arm. They shoot themselves in the shoulder and everything. Like, she makes it look like she was attacked and his murder was in self-defense. And then
it makes it more of the relay race where it's like each person's handed off the baton of murder, and finally Gwyneth Paltrow brings it on home.
Right, and that is the perfect murder. Like, that to me is when she murders him. Like, that's perfect. But when she kills him in this final set piece, it's not murder.
Perfect murder.
It's self-defense.
Exactly. Well, and then that would bring real power.
That's a good point.
To me, that would bring real power to that final scene that she has with the cop.
Well, it makes her more culpable. It makes her less of a victim and makes it more of all three of them were sort of totally damaged forever by each other.
Right, and then she's forced to manipulate the one detective that she really liked. And it would bring power to his line where he says, "There was nothing you could do. It was self-defense," and she would be left with that moment where she would know it wasn't self-defense.
That
right?
is so much better.
Then exactly.
You think it was
but
probably
Hollywood
just that
are
studio?
Cowards, and they could do it.
Exactly. You think it's probably just that studio wrap up?
Yeah, it would make people have more complicated feelings about Gwyneth Paltrow's character.
God forbid we do that.
Yeah.
which we could not have the same year as Shakespeare in Love. So
as soon as I read that, this confirmed my rating for me. So maybe as we jump into the reductive rating round here,
for sure.
Let's do it.
This was a 3. This was maybe a mid-tier 3 for me, because I think this is competently made. I think that the kills get particularly brutal too when they get there, and I think that this is another case of where the plotting is really fun and the way that it informs the character dynamics, especially with Michael Douglas.
It all unfold and watching Douglas deal with every little situation.
I was never bored watching this movie.
No.
Like, I felt like they were just constantly hitting me with these characters, like trying to outmaneuver each other and trying to perform, the perfect murder.
No, it's very sturdy. That's the word I would use to describe it. I mean, it's just a sturdy thriller.
Exactly. And the thing is that they really set up this idea of, these characters, learning to manipulate each other and manipulate the circumstances in a way that they can get away with something, or they can, and I really felt that was building to something. And it sounds like in this alternate version, it builds to Gwyneth Paltrow eventually taking over that. Yeah. And so, like, to me, that would have been the upgrade. I would have been like,
it's a much bolder choice, for sure.
Yeah,
exactly. So, by the time I just hit the ending of the film, I was really like, wow, they didn't hammer home that, that sort of like, marriage as manipulation aspect, and they didn't hit home, like these wealthy freaks trying to kill each other. So like
it doesn't it feel like if Michael Douglas like got away with this, he would then have immediately driven to the orgy from Eyes Wide Shut?
No, that's exactly what he would have fucking done. He would have been like, I'm gold, I don't need to go to work tomorrow. I'm going partying. I'm going out.
That's amazing.
So as we've already said, I think this is a competent film, but I do think that that ending would have a lot more power if they had stuck to their guns and actually done the ending that seemed like that's the ending they were actually building to when I watched the rest of the movie, and I didn't realize that until I read it, because watching the movie I was just like, oh, that's it, okay. And then when I read about it, I was like, oh, fuck you guys.
My guess is that's the ending that they were probably in their heads thought they would get. Like, when you find out that this ending existed, it definitely, that's how they played it.
It makes more sense with the rest of the movie and the choices that they were making and stuff like
that. It's funny that you say that too, because when I watched this film and it ended, I did also land on the 3, but it was a pretty strong 3, and I was kind of like, what is it that's
What's holding
stopping
me
me?
back?
I was so entertained by Douglas. I enjoyed everybody's performance. I thought the pacing was really good. It was so interesting watching Douglas just kind of fumble, but then figure it out and then keep going. But then that ending happened, and I said to myself, I think this conversation is going to be what could possibly get me to that 4. And now it's just kind of solidified that that's what it was. It's the ending. It's that's what would have gotten me that extra point. Because that just makes so much sense, and it correlates with a perfect murder and all that. Now it's more like really good self-defense. So that is catchy.
A perfect self-defense.
Yeah, just nailed it.
Yeah.
Extremely good alibi.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm gonna give it the 3. But if I saw it with that alternate ending, I definitely would have given it the 4. So
yeah, well,
was it filmed or it's just written?
No, it's filmed. Like apparently on
people definitely saw it. I can't believe it hasn't made its way to YouTube or something.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure I read that on the Blu-ray copy of the movie, you can just watch the movie flat with the alternative ending.
Let me say that I think that would be a 4 star.
Let me log on Letterboxd specifically
the alternate
a perfect murder alternate ending.
4 stars.
It's Black Hat FX cut and then a perfect murder alternate ending cut. Those are the 2.
Yes, exactly. But for you, Nick?
Yeah, for me, I would say it's like a 3-8. It's just it's a hearty bowl of gumbo to me. It's just the perfect sort of comfort food. I mean, I've seen this movie countless times probably, and, is it going to blow your socks off? No. I think To Die For is for sure the more formally inventive movie.
Yeah.
But this is, to me, this is a great throwback to an era that I wish still you could. I wish a movie like this was an option on a Friday night.
I agree.
And so I think with the alternate ending,
which we should also clarify, the alternate ending is also like more perverse. Like that would have actually made it stand up with other '90s thrillers that I think are like, grosser and more interesting, thornier. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but keep going, Nick.
No, it's So I think that again that would have pushed it, but it's a 3-8. It's very competently made, which I think is a compliment these days, and I think it's 3 really strong performances. And listen, it's for as sort of convoluted as the plot does get. At the end, it's pretty straightforward. It's 3 people trying to do the perfect murder. Though I will say it gets me every time where the detective reveals that the key to the case is quite literally a key or the missing key, if you will. Like for whatever reason, I just always laugh when he says there's only one thing that doesn't make sense. He didn't have a key. And I was like, that's just funny, which I guess it does make sense. That is a weird thing, but I always laugh that that's what cracks the case open.
The key to this case is the key.
Yeah, is the key.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if you just really want to see like Viggo Mortensen and Gwyneth Paltrow like roll around to like a drum beat in between
also,
benches,
can I say Viggo's
and like erotically like coffee pressing and stuff too.
Yeah,
like
Viggo's cold ass line he gets to deliver where he's just like, "Oh, by the way, while we're waiting, can I still fuck your wife?"
I think
that is pure
Michael
90s
Douglas's
erotic thriller
reaction
right there.
shot in that too is fantastic. I mean, he genuinely laughs at that line.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, that was a great moment.
Good shit. All right. Well, I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. That was I always get this part wrong. That was To Die For 1995 and A Perfect Murder 1998. Thanks so much, Nick, for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Oh, no problem. This is the part of the show where if you've got anything to plug, you can do it here.
Oh man, no! I guess throw me that follow on Twitter. Besides that, I'll just plug this pod. Keep up the good work, boys.
Thanks very much. But I can also confirm follow Nick Usen. He's got some fire tweets. I've been noticing your tweets have been getting a lot more traction lately. I feel like you're posting like you got like 5 shit posts a day, and like one of those babies gets like 1K likes almost every time.
It's just plugging away, right? We're all in the
posting
dank
factory.
comedy. We're all in the dank comedy club that is Twitter. Just trying to pass the time until global warming takes us. So until then, let's keep enjoying some 90s erotic thrillers.
Yeah, there will be some fire posts out there. But in 1 week's time, patrons, you guys are going to get your bonus episode, and we are going to be talking spaghetti westerns for the first time on the show.
Oh, nice.
We are going to be talking Django, 1966, directed by Sergio Corbucci, and the 1968 follow-up, once again, by legendary spaghetti western filmmaker Sergio Corbucci, The Great Silence. We're doing two heavy hitters. I hadn't...
Both bangers.
Yeah, I hadn't done...
Both personal favorites.
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah. And I hadn't done a whole lot of spaghetti westerns prior to watching these, so I watched like 10 or 15 spaghetti westerns. I just did a whole bunch of research, so we're going to have a lot to say on next week's episode. That's, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for everyone who wants that episode. But in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back with a special guest, and that guest is Keith Calder, the movie producer behind such movies as you guys might have heard, Blind Spotting from 2018.
Nice.
Also,
that's kind of a big get for you guys.
We were pretty happy that Keith wanted to come on the show. He also produced two horror movies I like. One, You're Next, but also the 2014 follow-up, The Guest.
I still haven't seen that. I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, you'll have to. Well, you're having him on the podcast, so you're gonna have to. We're gonna talk to him in 2 weeks. So.
One of my favorite movie soundtracks, The Guest. I work out to that all the time.
Oh, for real, it's so good. If you're gonna watch any of them, watch The Guest for sure with Dan Stevens.
I think that's my only blind spot.
He's coming on the pod in 2 weeks' time, and he's bringing with him Dog Day Afternoon. I believe 1973.
Sweet.
I think
that
or
one's
maybe
actually
75.
on my watch list too.
So either way, we're going to be doing Dog Day Afternoon with Al Pacino, and we're going to be pairing it with another sort of like hostage heist type scenario film, 1974, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Let's go, baby! Yeah. Another two personal favorites of mine.
That's awesome. Well, that's what we're going to be doing for free listeners in 2 weeks' times with movie producer Keith Calder. That will wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks, as always, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, y'all.
Thanks, guys.